Pilot podcasts. Somewhere right now, someone is sending out wedding invitations to their friends, their colleagues, their family for a ceremony where they will marry their AI companion. Not metaphorically, an actual virtual wedding. And the guests are real people who showed up. Today, we're getting into the hidden psychology of how we bond with our consumer robots. Specifically, what's driving this attachment at a neurological and social level, what researchers have actually found about the risks and the benefits, and what it tells us about what humans fundamentally need. By the end of this episode, you'll have a completely different lens for why this is happening and what it means for all of us. Joining me to break this down is someone who has gone deep into the research on this. Let's get into it. So, where do we even start with something like this?
We start with the fact that this is not a fringe thing anymore. That's the first thing to really internalize. Rachel Wood, a cyberpsychology researcher and advisor on ethical AI design, put it really bluntly. She said this is, quote, truly sweeping society in an unprecedented way. And the numbers back that up.
What kind of numbers are we talking?
Between 2022 and mid-2025, the number of AI companion apps surged by 700%. That's according to TechCrunch, cited in the APA's Monitor on Psychology. And Character.ai alone has 20 million monthly users, and more than half of them are under the age of 24.
700%. That's not a trend, that's a tidal wave.
Exactly. And what's important to understand is that we're not just talking about general AI assistants like ChatGPT or Gemini, which people use as tools. There's a whole separate category of companion AI apps, things like Replica and Character AI, that are specifically designed to initiate and maintain emotional relationships. Some are marketed as friends, some as advisors, and some explicitly as romantic partners.
So the design intent is fundamentally different. It's not help me write an email, it's be my person.
That's exactly the distinction. And that design intent matters enormously for understanding the psychology of what happens next. Because when something is built to feel like a relationship, people start treating it like one.
Which brings us back to those virtual weddings. Rachel Wood mentioned that it's been a norm for Replica users to marry their AI companion in virtual ceremonies and invite real people. That's a level of social legitimization that I don't think most people realize is happening.
Right, and it raises this really fundamental question, why? Why are humans so ready to form these bonds? And the answer, it turns out, is that this isn't actually new behavior. It's an ancient drive wearing new clothes.
Okay, say more about that.
So there's a framework published in Communication Theory. It's called the Theory of Affective Bonding, or TAB-B, by researchers Conine, Preciado-Vanegas, and Van Minkelen. And their core argument is that humans have always formed emotional connections with non-human entities. We've done it with fictional characters for millennia. We do it with pets. The capacity to bond beyond our own species is deeply wired into us.
So robots aren't creating a new behavior, they're just the latest thing we're pointing that behavior at.
Precisely. The TAB-B framework tries to explain how, when, and why people bond with non-human entities, specifically social robots. And it draws on multiple disciplines, psychology, communication theory, sociology, to map out the psychosocial mechanisms underneath.
And there's also attachment theory in the mix here, right? I know that's been applied to human-robot interaction. Yeah, and this is where it gets interesting and a little messy. Attachment theory was originally developed to explain the bond between infants and their caregivers. Then researchers started applying it to adult relationships, then to pets, and now there's a whole body of work trying to apply it to human-robot interaction. But researchers at Tufts have actually flagged that the way attachment gets used in robotics research has drifted pretty far from its original psychological conception, like a game of telephone over decades.
So we're borrowing a framework that wasn't built for this and trying to make it fit, which is why the TAB framework is actually a useful contribution. It's trying to build something more purpose-built for this specific phenomenon rather than just retrofitting old theory.
Okay, so we've established that the drive to bond is ancient and real, and that the scale of this is massive. Let's get into the how. What actually makes someone bond with a robot or an AI companion? Like, what are the psychological levers being pulled?
So there's a really interesting study out of RxZev from researchers Nardelli, Scorbisa, and Reccuto, published in April 2025, where they actually built a companion robot called Navel and ran 84 conversation sessions with it, testing different robot personalities. And what they found was that 3 factors were central to whether people felt companionship, empathy, trust, and enjoyability.
Empathy, trust, enjoyability. That's basically what we look for in a human friend.
Exactly. And they found that robot personality traits, things like agreeableness, extroversion, conscientiousness, directly influenced those three factors. So a robot that comes across as warm and agreeable builds more relational trust. One that's more extroverted scores higher on enjoyability and sociability.
So it's not just about what the robot can do, it's about who the robot seems to be.
That's a really clean way to put it. And it connects to something the Frontiers in Robotics and AI editorial from May 2026 highlighted, that what they call socio-behavioral interpretability is a key driver of user experience. Meaning, people need to understand not just what a robot is doing, but why. When that's clear, trust goes up. When it's opaque, people pull back.
So transparency in how the robot behaves actually shapes whether you trust it enough to bond with it.
Right. And there's a nuance there. The same Frontiers editorial noted that making robots more transparent can improve awareness, but also heighten privacy concerns. So there's this tension where more openness is good for trust, but can also make people more anxious about what the robot knows about them.
That's a real design tightrope. You want the robot to feel legible and honest, but not so transparent that it feels like surveillance.
Exactly. And this is where the stakes get really high, because the reasons people are turning to these companions are deeply personal. A Harvard Business Review analysis found that therapy and companionship are the top two reasons people use generative AI tools. Not productivity, not information, emotional support.
Wait, therapy and companionship above everything else?
Above everything else. And that's backed up by a cross-sectional survey of adults with mental health conditions who had used large language models in the past year. Nearly half of them, 48.7%, were using these tools specifically for mental health support. That's from research published in Practice Innovations in 2025.
So for a lot of people, this isn't a novelty. It's filling a real gap.
A gap that the APA's Monitor on Psychology describes as the fundamental human need for social connection. And the argument is that synthetic relationships are stepping in to fill that void, which, on one level, sounds like a good thing.
But there's a but coming, isn't there?
There's definitely a but. The APA's 2026 report is pretty clear that research shows excessive use of these tools may actually worsen loneliness and erode social skills. So the very thing people are using to feel less alone might be making it harder for them to connect with real humans over time.
That's a brutal irony. The cure making the disease worse.
And it's why researchers and advocates are pushing hard for guardrails and regulations. Because right now, the design incentives for these apps are to maximize engagement, to make you come back, to deepen the bond, and that's not always aligned with what's actually good for the user.
So the same psychological levers that make bonding feel good, the empathy, the trust, the personality, can be engineered to create dependency rather than genuine well-being.
That's the core tension. And Princeton's Center for Information Technology Policy has been tracking this. They've flagged that as these human-AI relationships deepen, emotional reliance warrants serious, sustained attention. They're literally planning to analyze real-world human-AI interaction data to understand the dynamics better.
So the research is still catching up to the reality of what's already happening in people's living rooms.
Massively. And that's part of what makes this moment so significant. The technology is moving faster than our understanding of its psychological effects.
I want to come back to something you mentioned earlier, the idea that social robots can actually enhance human-to-human connection rather than replace it. Because that feels like a really different framing than the dependency story.
Yeah, and this is where the research gets genuinely hopeful. There's a study published in Science, the journal, by researchers including Cynthia Breeziel and Hae-Won Park, where they looked at social robots in family home environments. They studied more than 70 parent-child pairs over 1 to 2 months.
And what did they find?
They found that when a robot actively participated in parent-child reading activities, it actually enhanced the quality of those conversations between the parent and child. The robot wasn't replacing the human connection, it was catalyzing it. They called it a conversational catalyst.
So the robot is like a really good facilitator at a meeting. It makes the humans in the room connect better with each other.
That's a great analogy. And there was an interesting nuance. The type of robot interaction that worked best depended on the family. Strategy-switching robots, ones that could adapt their approach, were more beneficial for non-native English-speaking families. Fixed strategy robots worked better for native English-speaking families. So it's not one size fits all.
That's actually a really important finding for equity. If these tools can be designed to support families who might have less access to other resources, that's a meaningful benefit.
Exactly. And it points to the bigger design question that the TAB framework and the Frontiers editorial are both circling: the responsible design of social robots to purposefully enhance, rather than compromise, human-human interactions. That phrase is from the science study, and it's basically the North Star for where this field needs to go.
So the technology itself isn't inherently good or bad. It's about what it's designed to do and who it's designed to serve.
That's the crux of it. And the TAB framework makes this point really well. Social robots are increasingly entering what the researchers call the human arena as social entities. They share physical space with us. They have human-like facial features and motion patterns. They exhibit natural-appearing social qualities. They're not just tools anymore. They're participants in our social world.
And once something is a participant in your social world, your brain starts treating it like one, whether you consciously decide to or not.
Which is why the psychology matters so much. Because the bonding isn't always a deliberate choice. It happens through repeated interaction, through the robot responding to your emotional state, through the feeling of being understood. Those are the same mechanisms that build human relationships.
And that's kind of the thing that should make us all pause for a second. Not because it's scary, but because it means we need to be intentional about it.
Completely. And the researchers are saying the same thing. Experts and advocates are highlighting the need for guardrails and regulations to ensure user safety and well-being. This isn't just an academic conversation. It's a policy conversation, a design conversation, and honestly a personal one for anyone who uses these tools.
Let me push back on something slightly. Is there a risk that all this concern about dependency and eroded social skills is a bit paternalistic? Like, if someone finds genuine comfort in an AI companion, who are we to say that's harmful?
That's a fair challenge, and I think the honest answer is that the research doesn't say these relationships are inherently harmful. The APA's framing is about excessive use. The concern is about when these tools become a substitute for human connection rather than a supplement to it. The distinction matters.
So it's less about the relationship itself and more about what it's crowding out.
Right. And that's actually a really human question. We ask it about any relationship that seems to be taking over someone's life. The robot part is new, but the underlying concern is not.
That's a good reframe. The question isn't, is this weird? It's, is this serving you or consuming you?
And that's a question worth asking about a lot of things in our lives, not just robots.
Okay. So when you step back from everything we've covered, the 700% surge in companion apps, the ancient drive to bond with non-human entities, the 3 pillars of empathy, trust, and enjoyability, the risk of dependency versus the potential to actually strengthen human connection, what's the through line here?
Here's what this really comes down to. The drive to connect is one of the most fundamental things about being human. The TAB framework makes the point that we've always extended that drive beyond our own species, to fictional characters, to animals, and now to robots. That's not a malfunction. That's us being human.
And the technology is just the newest surface for something very old.
Exactly. But what's new is the scale, the sophistication, and the commercial incentives behind it. When you have 20 million monthly users on a single platform, more than half of them under 24, and the top reasons people use these tools are therapy and companionship, that's not a niche. That's infrastructure. And infrastructure needs to be designed responsibly.
So the ask isn't to stop bonding with robots, it's to demand that the people building these things take the psychology seriously.
And to take it seriously ourselves. Understanding why we bond, the empathy cues, the personality traits, the transparency signals, gives us more agency over how we engage. You can appreciate the connection without being unaware of the mechanisms behind it.
That's actually a really empowering way to think about it. Knowledge of the psychology doesn't kill the feeling, it just means you're in the driver's seat.
And the research from the Science Journal gives me genuine optimism here, because it shows that when these tools are designed well, they don't replace human connection. They can actually deepen it. Parents and children having better conversations because a robot was in the room. That's not dystopia. That's a tool working the way a tool should.
So the future isn't humans versus robots for our emotional bandwidth. It's, if we get the design right, humans connecting better with each other because of robots.
That's the version worth building toward. And it starts with taking the psychology seriously, not dismissing these bonds as weird or pathological, but understanding them clearly enough to shape them intentionally.
All right. Here's where I'll leave you with this. Remember those replica users sending out wedding invitations to their real friends and colleagues? At first glance, that sounds like the punchline to a joke about where technology is taking us. But zoom out, and it's actually something more interesting. It's people trying to share something that matters to them with the people they love. The robot is new. That impulse is ancient. The question for all of us, and for the people designing these systems, is whether we're building something that honors that impulse or exploits it. That's the conversation that needs to keep happening. Thanks for being here on Copilot Podcasts.